this have been extremely embarrassing for Faulkner?
There couldn't have been a more embarrassing form for an Irish judge. It would have been one of the most embarrassing things in his entire career.
Great, good. I mean, what happened? Did this die down?
Well, what happens is that it drops as a news item, but obviously it lodges in the consciousness of Dubliners. And it was, in fact, preserved in James Joyce's Ulysses, because in one scene, the nighttime scene in Ulysses, Leopold Bloom, of course is Jewish, undergoes an hallucination. And this hallucination involves his being prosecuted. And he's prosecuted in front of Sir Frederick Faulkner. And Sir Frederick Faulkner then addresses Leopold Bloom and says, I will put an end to this white slave traffic and rid Dublin of this odious pest. And as with Henry Cann, then orders him to be detained in Mountjoy prison.
That is just extraordinary.
Faulkner clearly had committed anti-Semitic transgressions before, but nothing as violent as he did in the Cann case. And the violence in the novel corresponds to the sort of intensity in the Cann case itself.
Henry Cann was sentenced to 1 year's hard labour. He began his sentence at Mountjoy Prison, but after 2 months was transferred to Kilmainham Prison.
The next step is we've got to find out whether he did have to serve his full 12 months. I want to find out what the impact was like for his immediate family, and I want to know, did he lose his business because of this?
Kilmainham is now a museum, and Dervla is meeting the administrator, Niall Bergin.
We're in the old west wing of Kilmainham Jail. This actually dates back to 1796.
And would Henry have served time in any of this part of the
Well,
jail?
this section of the building, along with the east, was very much in operation, but we don't actually have a record of what particular cell Henry occupied. You can feel, even walking through here now, it's incredibly cold.
It's freezing.
As we know, Henry was sentenced to hard labour, and this is actually a picture of the hard labour yard in Kilmainham Jail.
Right.
Who knows, Henry could even be in that photograph.
These men here are just essentially breaking down
This
bricks.
is hard labour. On entry into prison, prisoners were photographed.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is there a photograph of Henry?
Unfortunately, no. I couldn't find one.
That's so disappointing.
Yeah,
I'm
it is.
desperate to find a photograph of
Yeah,
him.
Henry's image didn't survive.
When Henry Cann arrived in Kilmainham in 1902, conditions were harsh and the prison regime was punishing. Henry and his wife Teresa petitioned the government for his early release, pleading Henry's ill health and Teresa's inability to support their 5 children.
Do you have any information about whether or not he served his full time?
We have. And this is would be his, well, you can read it yourself.
So we have the Chief Secretary's office, the 11th of June. Prisoner Henry Cann be discharged on commutation of sentence. Prisoner has been released. So he served 6 months.
He served 6 months. His petition, it appears, was successful.
I'm very relieved to see that he's been released, but after 6 months here, what would have happened next to him?
There's one more document I think you'll find.
Oh. Okay, so I'm looking at Henry's death certificate. So we've got 1907, 13th of October, Henry Cann, age last birthday, 50 years. So he's out 4 years and he dies. Wow. Can you tell me what the reference to the RDL asylum is?
That would be the Richmond District Lunatic Asylum.
You know, I had to say I didn't think there was going to be a happy ending, but it's very very sad, you know. Poor Henry. I have come very far with this journey, and I owe it to him to get the facts clear about how he died. But I don't want to go any further, to be honest with you. I'd quite happily like to just walk away now. I feel a bit scared, to be honest with you.
Dervla's come to St Brendan's Hospital, the site of the Richmond District Lunatic Asylum, to meet consultant psychiatrist Brendan Kelly.
I want to know, records-wise, how long he stayed here, but also whether what he was suffering from potentially, you know.
Okay, well, this document here records his admission to the asylum. And at the time of admission, they say he was restless, noisy, and trying to escape from the department.
Was he fearful? He was clearly fearful.
He was clearly fearful of the asylum, as very many people were. Their status once in the asylum was that of a detained patient.
Right, so he's a prisoner again.
He's a prisoner again.
Right.
And the medical practitioner certifying admission writes that Khan is greatly depressed and crying whenever I speak to him.
Okay.
It turns out that Henry Khan had a series of strokes which clearly affected his physical health, but also his mental health. And we know about 50% of people after a stroke become depressed to a greater or lesser extent.
But they didn't know it then?
No.
Okay.
So while he was committed to an asylum, it appears to have been the result of strokes and the psychological effects of those rather than any other form of mental illness.
Okay.
Henry Khan suffered his first stroke in 1906, over a year before his admission to the asylum. Unable to provide for his wife and 5 children, he entered the North Dublin Union Workhouse, one of the only places in Dublin that offered any kind of medical assistance to the poor. But conditions there were atrocious.
The asylum sent a committee to inspect the workhouse in 1907 and to report on conditions. And that was during the period when Henry Khan was in the workhouse.
Right.
So this is an account of the special committee.
We are constrained to report that the provision for the inmates is truly deplorable. The ward is little more than a dungeon, ventilation is inadequate, and the beds are laid upon wooden trestles. Oh, this is awful. The patients are obliged to take their meals in this repellent place. Sorry, I can't read anymore.
The workhouse was a difficult place, and it catered for a lot of people with varying degrees of social problems, physical problems, and mental illness. As you can see, this is not a place for someone who's physically ill or physically compromised.
So clearly I'm getting a picture now that that he must have got out of Kilmainham. He's obviously, I mean, I don't know, but I'm trying to think maybe he's obviously lost his business. And he's found himself in the workhouse. God. So it's a massive decline.
Yes, it reflects a social decline and also possibly a decline in his, certainly his physical health. Many of the records for patients contained photographs of the patients. We have what remains of the photograph of Henry Khan here, but when we look at it, we can see that it was damaged, and alas,
Right.
we have no image of Henry Khan to show you.
I find the fact that it's completely blank, it's eerie. The fact that he's completely annihilated, you know, that's I suppose it's very disturbing. But he still lives, I mean, he's still here. I just don't know, I would have loved to have been able to point him out in a crowd, I guess. I can't help thinking that maybe this whole story has been about righting a terrible wrong. Had Faulkner not sentenced my grandfather to 12 months jail, however shortened that sentence was, he effectively broke my grandfather. He broke him. He's utterly destroyed him. I mean, after all, what was his greatest crime? He was a betting man, and he happened to be Jewish. You know, I didn't want it to be a story of Jewish persecution, but it's very hard not to see that that's precisely what happened to this man. The only brightness is that life has conspired somehow to allow me to tell his side of the story. It's been very exciting, but it's also been very tough. Like, if anyone was to ring me up and say, "Who do you think you are?" have approached me to do their life story, I'd say, do it. But take some Valium.
We're heading into the deep here on BBC HD tomorrow night at 9 with a brand new drama series. And next tonight, there's drama headed your way with Survivors at 1. After a little music next.